Boa tarde a todas, a todos. Em nome da Câmara Municipal de Ribeirão Preto e do Fórum de Saúde Mental de Ribeirão Preto, nós queremos dar as boas-vindas a todos os participantes do 2º Congresso Internacional de Saúde Mental, do Instituto Franca e Franco Basaglia. Para nós é uma grande alegria podermos sediar esse encontro, acolher a todos nesta tarde, dando continuidades ao trabalho que foram realizados nesta manhã. Dizer da grande alegria de Ribeirão Preto poder receber vocês num espaço onde se discute leis, saber que no nosso país a gente já tem tantas leis, mas entre a lei e o cumprimento dela existe um vácuo muito grande, e só nessa troca de experiências que é possível fazer essa avaliação e ver as necessidades que nós temos ainda de avanços. Então, nós desejamos uma tarde de muito sucesso, bastante trabalho, mas também grandes desafios e muito motivadora para todos engajados aí na luta da saúde mental. Gostaria de convidar a professora Clarissa Webster, que está à frente desse projeto e vai fazer a apresentação do palestrante dessa tarde. Muito obrigada.
Bom, boa tarde. Eu acho que algumas pessoas já estiveram com a gente no período da manhã e outras pessoas estão chegando agora. Então, nós estamos muito felizes de estar aqui hoje com essa oportunidade. Gostaria de agradecer a vereadora Gláucia por ter aberto aqui o espaço, né? É a Casa do Povo, né? Então, mas agradeço bastante a vereadora que está aqui presente com a gente. E agradeço a todos presentes e gostaria de agradecer especialmente o professor Rolf Sundet, da Noruega, psicólogo clínico, que essa tarde vai estar compartilhando um pouco das experiências dele no trabalho em saúde mental, abordando a temática de ferramentas conversacionais para o trabalho em saúde mental. Então, espero que seja uma tarde muito produtiva e que, como disse a vereadora, que a gente possa usar esse espaço para estar crescendo, para estar questionando, ampliando nossas práticas e também para a gente estar fortalecendo as nossas redes, porque é dessa forma que a gente constrói mudanças aí na saúde mental. Então, agradeço bastante, professor Rolf, por estar aqui hoje e uma boa tarde a todos nós.
Thank you, Clarissa. How's this microphone working? Can you hear me? This is like coming on the stage of a TV show, actually. I have to do like this. I'll stand here. It's very nice for me to be here in Ribeirão Preto. I've been here for over a week, and I'm very happy. Have lots of great experiences in Brazil. First time for me to be in Brazil. Hopefully not the last. I want to learn the samba and the other dance. What's it called? Forró. Yeah, forró. That's my aim in life now. Okay, I'm going to talk. I come from Norway. I work as a is it okay if I keep the mic like this? You hear? Just give me a sign if my voice disappears. Okay, so I come from a small city 40 kilometers west of Oslo, up in Norway. And I'm very happy to be here in this fantastic, beautiful Norwegian summer that you have here in Ribeirão Preto. I noticed that you call it the winter, and that keeps me thinking, what the hell would the summer be like? Yeah, so, but I'm not here to talk about the weather. I'm here to talk about working in Norway. And what is important is that when I'm going to talk, I talk from my context. So the ideas that I'm going to tell you about must be translated into a Brazilian context. So this is very important. I try to open up for questions and small discussions so you can comment. I think protest is very important. Protest speaks to the fact that what I'm saying doesn't fit with your context. So it's also important that you protest. Norway is a fortunate country. In many ways, we are the sheiks of the north. We struck oil, and that's made work quite good for us. So we have a strong social support system. I know that things are different in Brazil. So again, see if some of these thoughts could bring you to think about something important in your country. But I'm just new in getting to know the Brazilian context, but I'll try to not give you too many wild examples from Norway. This is a picture. I have some commercials, you know, if you want to go to a cold country, this is a place to go. This is the winter. It's artwork outside the university college where I live. So, I will start and tell you a bit about the clinical context that I've been going to talk about. For the last 15 years until 1.5 years ago, I was working in something called the Ambulant Family Section. It's the Department of Mental Health for Children and Adolescents. In Norway, there is 2 levels to mental health service. We have the municipality level and the specialist level, which is the hospitals and outpatient clinics. And I have been working at that level in something called the Ambulant Family Section. I've been working with families, with children and adolescents who are given a mental disorder diagnosis. The families that come to us are families who usually need more intensive treatment and contact that you can get in an outpatient clinic in Norway. So we're sort of a second line on our level. Patients and families come into the outpatient clinic. There is assessment, diagnosis, start of treatment. And then, probably in Brazil, as everywhere, therapists and mental health workers meet families that, you know, where there are collaborative difficulties. That the family doesn't really want to do what we want to do. The families think differently about the problem that I've been taught to think about the problem. So we had families that had tried treatment elsewhere, both on the municipality level and the specialist healthcare level. They wasn't helped, and in addition to and these collaborative problems very often has to do with the families, parents, children not experiencing being heard or respected. It has also a lot to do with families experiencing that they are blamed for the children's problems, that the parents are blamed for the children's problems. Now, I know from my own family and from my own experience as a parent that parents do very many different things. Those of you who are parents, you can think about situations where you really feel like a good mother or father. But I would also guess there are situations when you really doubted what this was going to do to your children. So it's not that I know also from my own family as a child that there are things parents do that is not good for children. And especially when families live under difficult social conditions with poverty, hard living conditions, these problems increase. But in a typical middle-class society that I come from, parents keep on doing strange things. But for me, mental problems are coming into the world due to a lot more than simply living with your parents. There are genetic things, There are lack of fit between the child and their environment. There are social issues. There are accidents. People die, parents die for reasons of sickness, for instance. So to me, mental health issues and problems are the result of complex processes. It's not easy to find one factor. Although we know that trauma and transgression are bad events, to be exposed for violence, for instance, also. But there is also the fact that even though you've been exposed to trauma, you don't necessarily develop mental problems. So this is a complex situation. So I've worked with these families who've been seen as difficult to collaborate with, and they have experiences with prior therapy that is no good for them. This doesn't mean that prior therapists are bad therapists. But in Norway, there are bureaucratic constraints on how to do mental health work. You should first do an assessment, then you should give a diagnosis. This diagnosis should make you check or find the right treatment. This is a system that fits many families in my country, but there are also many families it doesn't fit. There are even, I work with families who refuses to use psychiatric diagnosis on their children, for instance. So in order to help them, I have to do this paradoxical move that I state a diagnosis in the medical journal, but I don't use it as a tool in treatment. So there is a diversity. Okay, that was the next slide, wasn't it? Yeah. So, could you go back with the slide once? Yeah, so, okay, next slide, thanks. So, I worked in a team that you could call an eclectic. You know, we steal from everywhere. We are basically therapeutic thieves who steal from all kinds of models. That's to be eclectic. Then we are trans-diagnostic in the sense that diagnosis was not important for us when we choose which families who were coming to us. We chose those families who had trouble elsewhere, and diagnostics was not very interesting. We are inspired by systemic, narrative, dialogical, and collaborative-oriented ideas, for those of you who are interested or know these kinds of ideas. But you don't have to know them in order to listen to this here. So, next slide. This is a belief. It's not the truth, but it's belief. As a therapist, I have something I believe in. And I believe that there are no such things as interventions. There are only what I call turn-taking. Turn-taking speaks to the fact, for those of you who have small infants, or remember when, or seen small infants, you see just after birth, when the child has come into the world, and the infant and the mother starts this turn-taking. There is a sound from the child, the mother's responds with a sound, there is a bodily movement from the child, the mother responds with a bodily movement. So there is this growing dance between mother and infant. This is what we call turn-taking. And it's basic to all interactional thing, all conversations. One person speaks, the other listens. The listener speaks and the talker listens. And sometimes we talk in our mouth. Do you do that in Brazil? Yeah, I would guess. So, for me, there are turn-taking, there are coordinations. You know, coordination, when I watch the samba and see people who really can dance, their movements are like a river flowing. As a kid, I went to dancing school in Norway. And I had this strange experience that all the girls I danced with had this tendency to put their foot under my foot. And I thought, why can't they move their foot? Because I keep stepping on them. It's a kind of blaming behavior. So But then suddenly, for some reasons, we started to put the feet where they should be, and we were following the rhythm. So that's coordinations. So I think that when I work as a therapist, I need to start turn taking, and I need to get into a dance, a coordination. And usually coordinations are in conversations and dialogues. Words are always there, and we try to coordinate around. Okay, next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, so I wanted to talk about these families coming to us. They are referred from the outpatient clinic, and for us, what we have found out is that the first meeting is extremely important. What happens when you meet the families for the first time or second time decides very much what's going to happen later. So, what do we do when we meet our family? They come to us in the place. We had an apartment, for instance, that we had the opportunity to invite them into an apartment. What Norwegians do when they meet people is to talk about something ordinary in order to warm up. So Norwegians talk about the weather very often. Or if we've beaten Brazil in football, we would definitely start our conversations there. It's just happened once in our life. We're still talking about it, and I think it's 20 years ago. So we start with the ordinary, and we start to see what could these people talk with us about. And we try to be respectful. We try to do what we call affect regulation, in the sense that we would like people to feel comfortable, have some kind of feeling of safety. And every culture, I think, has manners of establishing these kinds of things. So just as in Brazil, coffee and tea is very important in Norway. So we usually offer people coffee and tea, and we talk about the weather, or when we beat Brazil and we start to talk, and people feel more at ease. And it's important for us to think that we will invite people to talk about something that they know how to talk about. That's what I call mastery. I've told some of my friends here my meeting with psychotherapy, so some of you have heard these stories before, but I'll try again. When I was 23, life was shit. And I felt I needed help, so I started psychotherapy with a body therapist, Reichian therapist. He told me to bring a sheet. I came, he asked me to put the sheet on the bed and to lie down on the bed. I took off all my clothes except my panties, lied down on the couch, and this therapist started to do body work, he massaged, and I did free association. And this kept going. It was during the winter, so it was a bit cold in that room, but I kept lying in my panties, hour, session after session. At some point, I started to wonder, was I supposed to take my clothes off? Imagine, you're in the middle of a very serious sort of analytic situation, and the only thought that comes to my mind is, were I supposed to take my clothes off? I'm lying here more or less naked. So finally, I took the courage and asked my therapist. His name was Arne. Am I supposed to take my clothes off? And he looked at me and he said, well, Rolf, you decide. First reaction, anger. Jeez, he could have told me. Second reaction, it means that I can decide for myself. So next session, I told him, I'm not going to take my clothes off. I'm not going to lie on that couch. I'm going to sit in a chair, and I want you to sit in the chair, and we're going to have a conversation. And my therapist said, yes, let's do that, Rolf. That's what you want. Then I realized something, that this is about what I want to do and to decide in my own life. So then I thought, maybe it was okay that he didn't tell me. But what I learned from this is that when people come to people like us, they don't know what this is about. Not even me, who was studying psychology, really knew what it was like to start therapy. So, I think it's important to give people a possibility to say yes to what they want in therapy and no. So that's about volition. Now, the next word, responsivity. Have you ever gone to your primary physician and you're worried about a health issue and you tell your doctor about the health issue and he responds not to your fear but something completely different? He talks about something else. You try to tell him. That's an example of lack of responsivity. Responsivity has to give response to the other in a manner that the other feels actually responded to. So this is also very important when we meet people first time. Am I able to respond to them in a manner that they feel responded to? It doesn't matter if I travel home and have this great feeling that I really managed to respond to everybody in the family. If I'm the only one who's experienced it, then it's irrelevant. Okay? So, and alliance. The concept of alliance from psychotherapy basically means that the people who come to us should feel heard and respected, as I've said, but that we also can negotiate goals. What should we do together, and how should we reach these goals? So, it's also important to attend the needs in and outside the session. What is it that these families think would be helpful for them? It's not what I think would be helpful for them, it's what I need to know what they think would be helpful. And also, I was in a position, and I know this was a unique position, that I could offer different kinds of intensities. I was allowed to work with the family for a whole day, a whole week, for instance. So this is a contextual situation that was special for me. So we usually discussed with them, how often do you need to come? How long should we talk? What we've discovered was that when you ask people what they want, they usually want less than what you think they want. And I also discovered that when I was a student of psychology, I heard about transference. And I also heard that a lot of clients basically wanted to live with me. And they would fall in love with me. I've had very few such experiences. It's almost that I think that I'm a sort of a pathological psychotherapist because I haven't experienced much transference in my life. I don't know what it is. The point is that I very early in my career discovered that if I gave my telephone number to people and said, if there is a life-threatening crisis, you have the option of calling me 24/7. But life-threatening crisis is actually life-threatening. So I used to work with drug addicts, and I told them, if you're in another city broke, and you call me to get help for money at 12 o'clock in the evening, I'm not going to respond to you, because that's not a life-threatening situation for me, not least in Norway. But, so if there is not life-threatening, please call me through work hours and I'll try to set up a condition. I've never felt this being misused. I told some others today that that I got a call once sitting in a pub in Australia, and the father said, I need a session for me and my son tomorrow or the day after if you can. And I said, I'm sorry, I'm sitting in a pub in Sydney, Australia, drinking beer, so there will be no session this week. And the father said, oh, enjoy a beer for me and call me when you get back home. We can manage. So my experience with families is that if they have the opportunity to contact you, they will manage. So, next slide, please. So, dialogue is the start point and end point of our work. It's important to talk with people. At the same time, when you work with kids, kids doesn't necessarily want to talk. They are shy, they are hesitant, they wonder what this therapy thing is all about. Sometimes when kids and adolescents have a problem, they feel blamed. So my experience is that if I'm going to talk with children, I would better talk with something that they could answer. So that's usually trying to talk with kids about their interests, for instance. Video games, World of Warcraft. When you have adolescents, there is hip-hop music. There's a lot of stuff. Soccer, sports, to find their interests. So the thing is to get a conversation going and try to tell the kids that I will respond to you on what you give me. And sometimes I feel that talking about problems is very overrated. Have any of you in your own relationship with your spouse experienced that you want to talk about the problem? You start during dinner or evening dinner, and as you try to solve the problem, things get worse and worse and worse. So the more you talk, the bigger the problem. So at midnight you really think, why did I ever think of the crazy idea of marrying this person? The more you sometimes try to specify your own perspective, the more you step on another person. So sometimes I think it's good not to talk too much about problems. I think in Norway there is a new disease among psychotherapists. They suffer from a condition called the avoidance of avoidance. You know, they cannot avoid things. They have to be on target all the time. I think it's good to avoid things sometimes. You don't have to be in agreement with me on this. So what this means is that for us, the important place is to start with conversations where people feel confidence, that they are able to decide what they're going to say for themselves. They are allowed to say yes and they're allowed to say no. I don't know how it is in Brazil, but as I understand it, it's much similar as in Norway when it comes to outpatient clinics. You have to do a very serious assessment. Then after this very serious assessment, you have to decide on a diagnosis. And on the basis of the diagnosis, you choose a method. So that means there is quite a long period of time between you start contact with the family around assessment until you start treatment. The fact is that diagnosis is a bad predictor of outcome. Assessment, I can hardly find any evidence for assessment being important when it comes to correlate assessment and outcome of therapy. What seems to be the best predictors of outcome is early experience change, in the sense that the family feel a bit secure, a bit more hopeful, a bit more heard. It doesn't mean that the problem is gone, but you have started on a path that might lead to something different. This is a good predictor. And the other predictor is what I call the therapeutic alliance, this respectful relationship where you negotiate goals and you try to find a way of working together. For me, and I know a lot of doctors and psychologists are in disagreement with me when I say, given the evidence, you should never start with assessment. You should never start with diagnosis. You should always start with treatment, because an essential part of treatment is to establish this good relationship. We know from research that for some clients, the good relationship doesn't necessarily change you, but it gives an opportunity to better work with methods that can help you change. But we also know now from research that some patients actually changed their symptoms simply by being in this good relationship. So what I say is that, as such, we start with treatment and we bring assessment and diagnostics in on a need-to-know basis given by the family. From a judicial point of view, I have to set a diagnosis. But for some families, diagnostics is not relevant. So then I tell them, I'll give you this diagnosis, protest if you're not agree. Then it stands there, and then we just forget it. In other families, diagnostics becomes very important. I've struggled with my son for years. Now I understand that attention deficiency hyperactive disorder is a description of my son that makes me understand that he responds differently when it comes to impulsivity, to activity, and to changing focus of attention. So this means I'm not against assessment and diagnostics, but they have to be put into a treatment context and not the other way around. It's important to talk with people and not about people. So what we've tried to say in our unit is that what I say about the family when I talk with my colleagues, I should be able to say the same things to the family. And if I say something to the family, I should say the same thing to my collaborative partners outside the session. If I'm not able to do these things, I recommend either to shut up or dissociate. You know, dissociation? It's usually connected to trauma, but I think it's important that if I have a thought that this mother is over-involved, she's symbiotic, or whatever kind of psychological word I mean, I need to talk with her and describe why do I use these words. And I have to do that in a respectful manner that doesn't blame her. If I'm not able to put that into words, then I must try to forget it. But I need to find a way. And seriously, if I talk with the referring agents, for instance, I would not use those kinds of words. I think that words get their meaning through how we use them. So it's when I use a word, I mean, the way we work, some colleagues said that we are therapists who are over-involved. I will try to show you that we do a lot of things with the family. To be over-involved is a negative word. So it points to that I do too much of something. It might be that therapists like me are over-involved, but what I usually tell my colleagues is that before we decide if I'm over-involved, we have to decide maybe your way of doing it's to be under-involved. You do less. So we have to find out what are these words' content. Okay. And we're also very much into what we call the position of not knowing and uncertainty. What do I mean by not knowing? The not knowing position is not a position without knowledge. How should I say this? When I graduated from psychology, my head was filled with theories. After that, I've been trained as a specialist, now trained as a professor. It means that this head is full of books and references. Luckily, I'm getting old, so I'm starting to forget. It comes natural when you get old that you forget things. And that means I'm not that much disturbed by theory any longer as I used to be, because I don't remember them. I have, as all of you, have a lot of what we could call generalized knowledge. We know a lot about things in general. But knowing something in general doesn't mean that you know something particular. That I have read some research about families and mothers or fathers over-involvement doesn't mean that that applies to the family in front of me, or the person in front of me. So sometimes I wonder what use I have of generalized knowledge. I will try to tell you what I think it can be used for, but it's very important. In science, you can use generalized knowledge to create hypotheses that you can investigate through scientific methods. I would never do that in a therapeutic context. I would never create a hypothesis and then set up a test to check, is this person this or that? I would rather talk with the person so that the person and I together can find out, for instance, this anxiety problem or this OCD behavior or whatever it is. How can the two of us understand it? So to me, to be a therapist is to use scientific knowledge, but you are never scientific. And then we could quarrel about what science is. So, uncertainty follows the not knowing position, because it means that every time I meet a family, a child, I'm uncertain. What is this all about? So it means that I need to get to know people. And my experience is that the quicker you find the truth, the more trouble you're in. The quicker you make a conclusion, this conclusion sticks. It's like a picture that you can't get out of your head. So uncertainty should help us always be in this position of always asking ourselves, is the picture I'm creating a good picture for the family or not? There is research from my country where Helen Nissen-Lee, her name is, looked at psychotherapy and investigated different therapists to find out which therapist seems to have the best results. And she basically found that there is very sort of two groups of therapists. It's those of us who know how to do this job. And we very clearly know that this person, this family should do this, and then everything would be okay. Then there is the other group who are very uncertain. They're not sure. They're like novice therapists. For those of you who just started to be a therapist, you're afraid, am I doing this wrong? These therapists seem to have a better result than those who are very sure. So, I know that some of you probably heard Richard Armitage earlier talk about open dialogues, and uncertainty is very central to open dialogue. It's the same principles that we follow. Okay, next slide, please. Now, you see I have a problem. I didn't know about this room, and I wanted to have a lot of stuff on the PowerPoint. And none of you are going to see what's on this PowerPoint. I don't see it either. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move up there because I need to see a bit. But before we do that, could we take just 5 minutes that you talk to the person beside you? If there is any, does this give meaning, what kind of thoughts you have? So I'd like you to take 5 minutes now, okay? 5 minutes for you.